early morning in the presidential palace, President Kwame Dede stood by the tall windows of his private chamber, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the national flag fluttered gently under the first breath of morning wind. A man of dignity and calm, he wore a tailored blue suit adorned only with a gold lapel pin, the seal of his office. He didn't speak at first, even as his chief aide, Daniel Bako, entered with a morning briefing in hand. Instead, the president seemed to savor the moment. The silence, the illusion of peace. "Your jet is being prepped now, sir," Bako said gently. "Rome is expecting your arrival before noon, local time. And the Vatican has confirmed your seat at the front of the diplomatic delegation." President Dede finally turned, nodding slightly. His face was handsome but tired. His second term had aged him not just in body but in spirit. He carried the burdens of a nation mired in economic hardship and political infighting, trying desperately to balance modernization with tradition, diplomacy with sovereignty. "The Pope," Dede said quietly, taking the folder from Bako's hand. "A man of peace, of principle." Bako smiled. "Much like yourself, sir." Dede chuckled under his breath, a brief flicker of amusement. "Let's hope the people see it that way." They walked together through the palace halls, passing columns draped with royal purple and the portraits of past presidents. At every turn, security officers saluted and aides scurried with documents and luggage. The air smelled of polished wood, old stone, and perfume like power distilled. In the grand atrium, Vice President Amadou Sala waited, flanked by ministers and military officials. Sala was younger, sharp-suited, and always smiling, though many whispered his ambition was louder than his loyalty. The president greeted him with a firm handshake. "You'll be acting president until I return," Dede said, his voice steady but layered with something unreadable. "No surprises." Sala bowed slightly. "Of course, Your Excellency. The nation is in safe hands." Cameras flashed. The national broadcaster was already streaming the moment live. Pomp and protocol unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. The president posed with his entourage, then made his way down the red-carpeted steps toward the motorcade waiting below. The streets outside were cordoned off by elite guards. Snipers watched from rooftops. Beyond the palace gates, the people had gathered to catch a glimpse of their leader. A few waved flags, some held signs of support. Others simply stared with tired eyes. In the armored limousine, President Dede finally allowed a sigh to escape. "Daniel," he said softly, "do you believe in omens?" Bako blinked, unsure. "Not often, sir. I had a dream last night. I was flying over the sea, and below me, the land was on fire." The car hummed quietly toward the airport. Bako glanced at him, his voice careful. "It was just a dream, sir." President Dede didn't respond. The jet taxied across the tarmac as the sun finally rose, golden light touching the wings of the aircraft. A line of saluting officers stood beside the runway. Inside the cabin, President Dede sat alone, staring out the window. He'd made dozens of international trips in his career, but this one felt different. As the engines roared and the plane lifted into the sky, the capital below grew smaller, the palace a speck among rooftops and dust. He thought of the speech he'd give at the Vatican about peace, faith, and the shared duty of moral leadership. But back on the ground, things were already beginning to shift. A different kind of ceremony was happening elsewhere, this one shrouded in shadows. Inside a heavily guarded military compound just outside the capital, General Colum met with a select group of colonels and high-ranking commanders. The room was dimly lit, the windows covered. A national flag sat draped over a table, beside it a folder marked Operation Restoration. "The president is airborne," Colum said, eyes cold. "In the next 48 hours, we take the capital." A tense silence followed. One colonel shifted uncomfortably. "What of the vice president?" Colum's jaw tightened. "He knows his role. We've agreed. Once we move, he steps aside quietly. And if he doesn't..." Colum tapped the folder. "Then he becomes a footnote." A nod passed around the room. The coup was already in motion. The presidential jet vanishes into a cloud bank over the Mediterranean. Below, a convoy of tanks begins rolling out of the barracks, quiet, methodical, relentless. The hum of the engines provided a steady, meditative soundtrack inside the luxurious presidential jet. President Kwame Dede sat in a reclined leather seat, gazing blankly at the clouds drifting past his window. A mahogany table before him held a leather-bound folder with the Vatican itinerary, a white handkerchief folded precisely beside it. Across from him, Daniel Bacco shuffled through briefing notes and foreign policy talking points. But the president wasn't reading. His mind was elsewhere, far from Rome, far from protocol. He was thinking about his country. "Peace isn't just the absence of war," Dede said suddenly, voice low and thoughtful. "It's the presence of justice." Bacco looked up, surprised by the interruption. "A quote for your speech, sir?" Dede gave a tired smile. "No, a reminder for myself." The plane soared across the Mediterranean. Hours passed in quiet preparation. Dede spoke with his foreign minister on board, reviewed the regional security reports, and recorded a short message to be aired on national television during his absence. A message of unity, pride, and diplomacy. The national television signal cut to the president's pre-recorded address. It opened with a sweeping shot of the palace gardens, the flag waving in crisp slow motion, and then transitioned to the president sitting in a stately chair. "My fellow citizens," his voice rang out with steady conviction, "today I carry with me the hopes of our nation to one of the world's most sacred gatherings, the inauguration of the Holy Father in Rome. In our history, faith and leadership have walked side by side. Let my presence there be a symbol of our commitment to peace, to diplomacy, and to the moral duty that binds us as Africans and as global citizens." He ended the speech with his hand over his heart, a national prayer softly echoing under his voice. The country watched, but not everyone applauded. In a dimly lit office at the National Defense Headquarters, General Colum sat in front of a muted TV. The president's face flickered on screen, warm, noble, presidential. Colum's expression didn't change. He turned to his second-in-command. "Turn it off." The screen went black. The coup's timetable was moving forward. All communication lines had been mapped. Loyalist officers were being watched. Internet infrastructure was marked for disruption. By the time he returns, Colum muttered, "There will be no throne to sit on." The sun was high over St. Peter's Basilica, its golden rays catching the polished stones of the piazza. A sea of dignitaries and spiritual leaders moved through the square, in waves of color and tradition. Swiss guards stood in formation. Choirs rehearsed in echoing domes. President Didi stepped from a black Italian limousine in a tailored black suit with a deep blue tie, the colors of his nation. The applause from the waiting crowd was polite but respectful. Cameramen zoomed in as he ascended the steps with dignified grace. Inside, the chapel glowed with sacred light. The atmosphere was electric with reverence. African cardinals nodded at his presence, a subtle recognition of shared pride. He bowed before the papal throne with quiet reverence, then took his seat among the delegation of world leaders, presidents, kings, chancellors, and ambassadors. To the untrained eye, this was a historic moment of unity. But to Didi, it was more than ceremony. It was testimony. After the ceremony, Didi moved through clusters of dignitaries at a diplomatic reception. Conversations swirled around global peace efforts, religious freedom, climate justice. The Pope had retreated for private reflection, but his message echoed through the square. Let those who carry swords learn the language of mercy. A female reporter from an international news network approached Didi for a quick statement. "Mr. President," she asked, "how do you see the role of faith in political leadership?" Didi smiled, the kind that hides fatigue with elegance. "Faith is the compass. Politics is the ship. One without the other drifts. Back home, that ship was already taking on water." The national broadcaster's lead anchor, a seasoned journalist named Omar Kintu, sat frozen in front of an incoming email. It was encrypted and signed, but the message was clear. Subject: internal alert. Prepare for blackout. Military units moving. Secure backup servers. Omar turned to his producer. "Start downloading everything. Record hard copies. Get backup drives from the archive room, now." The producer stared. "What's going on?" Omar didn't answer. He just stared at the monitor where President Didi's image was still smiling, shaking hands with the French Prime Minister. The screen flickered. A moment later, the lights blinked. Back in his hotel suite overlooking the Tiber River, President Didi removed his tie and sat on the balcony, sipping a cup of black tea. The city stretched out before him, eternal and beautiful. From here, his homeland felt like another planet, distant, almost unreachable. He dialed a secure line to the vice president. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Then Daniel entered, pale and breathless. "Sir, something's wrong. The military communications are failing. Social media is down." And the president stood slowly. "And what?" Daniel handed him a phone showing a leaked video clip from the Capitol. Armored vehicles moving into government zones. Soldiers taking positions. A military general standing in front of a national flag, declaring a temporary military transition. No gunshots, no riots, just silence and the cold efficiency of betrayal. President Didi staring at the TV screen in disbelief, reflected in the glass window of his Roman hotel room. His homeland visible only as a flickering image now under military control.